screens?
So we should probably get started because we want to be respectful of your time, and we've got a fair amount of material to cover, and want to leave lots of time for Q&A at the end of this. So HSO had asked to put together some presentations and some, I think there's some interest from students about thinking about the what's next, how do you actually conduct a job search. So our goal today is give you some overview of the job search from our perspectives, understanding that each search is unique and each individual who's searching is unique. I'll start it off, Matt, on the HESAL and not HSO, HESAL coordinator. And joining us is Renee, and I'll have Renee do a brief introduction of herself as well.
Okay, thank you. I'll include you in my introduction. I'm Renee Welch. I'm Director of Career Services, and my first Career Services Director was this guy. Matt was my first career supervisor at Colorado College, and my background is in housing, and through a quarter-time assignment at CC, I sort of learned career, which became my way out of housing. I'm wicked grateful for those experiences. So, yeah. You like that?
I like that. Nice segue. Nice. So there's like a legacy here. I get to say, I knew Renee way back when, and now she's gone on to be a director, and she'll do other great things. And I'll just say, planted some small seeds. So there's lots of different ways to think about the next steps. And as I was thinking about giving this presentation, so I used to give a presentation about job searching 4 times a day for every individual student that came in and wanted to figure out what was next. And then we also then developed programming around this. So one way to think about this is there's lots of different individual steps into the job search and figuring out what you're going to do next. For this, I've broken it down into sort of 3 areas, 3 steps. We're going to talk about 2 of those today. And I've got a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm not going to use it because it would seem strange to be doing that in front of everybody. So I'm going to be looking at some of my notes here, and I can share the presentation. There's nothing that you're going to be walking away from this saying, gosh, I've never thought about this before. These are things that you've probably thought about, but we're going to present it in a way that makes sense and adds structure to what sometimes can feel like there's just a wall and you don't even know how to start climbing it. So the 3 steps, I think, for me are, number 1, figuring out who you are. Number 2 is the actual search and the application process. And then number 3 is that part of it that we tend to get focus on, which is that interviewing and then getting to the job offer. We're not going to cover 3 today, but we can definitely set up another time where we spend some time thinking about the interview process. The first one is the who am I? Who here has seen that statue of the thinker? What does the statue of the thinker look like? Do it.
Can you rotate the
No. It's like very deep.
It's the right thinking and deep in thought.
It was a T-bone.
Oh,
yes.
Sorry.
Correct. I'm sorry.
I'm never going to find that.
Right, or you just transition to a different job.
Yes.
Like, I thought my first job worked, but I'm going to try this other one now.
Sorry. So oftentimes, I think people assume that they know what they're supposed to be doing, or that they assume that everybody else knows what they're doing except for them. So whenever you're in career services and somebody comes into the office and they're wondering, well, I don't know what I should be doing, they close the door and there's all this anxiety that gets brought up about this, and oftentimes there's emotion that gets brought up about what should I be doing next. So we direct it into, okay, first we need to think about, have you be thinking about, who are you? What is it that you want to be doing? This is not an assignment. These are not questions that you are going to answer by doing the thinker. You cannot go into a room or go out and sit on a rock and put your head on your hand and just keep thinking and come up with the answers to these questions. Instead, you need to engage in a process of active self-reflection. And that means probably talking to people. It means probably doing some writing. And what kinds of things should you be thinking about?
Can I also add in? I think
Please.
it involves discomfort. And experiencing things that that you may not think feel good as a way to find way forward. Way forward doesn't always feel good.
Correct.
And you don't always think it's good.
So what kinds of things do you think you should be thinking about as you're doing this active reflection?
What you don't want to do.
What you don't want to do.
Or what you don't like to do.
So that can be really helpful because if you think of all the jobs that are out there and you can quickly eliminate a whole segment of them based on things that you don't want to do, you have freed up your time to focus on the things that you do want to do. With one caveat, we oftentimes make lots of assumptions about what we don't want to do because we've never done it before. We've only thought about what that might involve. So oftentimes, years later, people will be saying, I had no idea that that's what it meant to work in student programming, or that's what it meant to work in residence life, or financial aid, or I've never thought about that in this context, and gosh, I really wish I would have thought about or done some further investigation to learn what it was like to work in conduct. So we don't want to be too quick to eliminate, but there are going to be some folks who say, I don't want to be in a living position. Okay? You have pretty much said that hall director positions, which make up a large percentage of entry-level master's positions, are not going to be something that you're going to explore. What else do you think you should be thinking about?
What makes you happy?
What makes you happy? So that's a really difficult one to think about, to add structure to it, because how do you go about thinking what makes you happy? What are some of the components of what goes into making you happy?
That's a great question.
See the way I just turned that around on you?
Reminds me of Fabian Garcia.
He's good at that as well.
Yeah.
So what is, but you're getting to the, yes, that's a good, that's where I wanted to end up. How do we end up at what makes you happy?
Can I also throw a little wrench in there?
Yeah.
My little wrench is sometimes happiness, passion, isn't always accessible to everyone. So to be able to always explore the thing that makes you happy may not be within your means. So I don't know if that's always, if happy can always be the first
Right.
Deciding thing, if that makes sense.
And it's rarely going to be the deciding thing. I think it's getting to the, what are those elements that lead you to happiness? Finding out what are those keys to it and maybe focusing on those. Because I think happiness is actually oftentimes an illusion. I guess it sounds more philosophical than anything else, but you're going to end up making your own happiness in positions. You're going to find out what you enjoy about them. But first figuring out what are those things that contribute to your happiness. Do you have some?
Kind of an idea. I know something student-centered would be very close to my happiness.
Excellent.
A direct student-centered experience, not an indirect. So like something on communications or Facebook, yes, you still communicate with a student. However, there's a lot of degrees of separation there. I prefer the face-to-face interaction, whether that's in financial aid or admissions. That is happiness to me.
I think sometimes being happy is a right fit. Like you could like the position because of what it looks like on paper, but if you don't have an informational interview or at least contact them beforehand, how do you know if it's the right fit for you? Because that's what I did for the program was, okay, I want to apply here, but I don't really know anything, and I see what the website looks like, and there's no Facebook page, so I'm going to contact whoever I can get a hold of to see if it works. That's actually a big thing for happiness for me now is am I going to fit in here? Is this right for me? Do they have the same vision and mission or goals that I have? Or is it going to go the opposite way?
Yes, and that presupposes that you've done thinking about what your goals are,
Exactly.
what work environment you want to be in, what support feels like to you, and realizing that you may not find that all in one position, but you're going to find pieces of that in one position. So I think part of this, the reflective process, is also what is it that you want to be doing in a year from now? And then what is it you want to be doing in 5 years from now? With the understanding that it's just having an idea of where you want to be, but you actually have no idea about what opportunities are actually going to present themselves. So you may not get there. You may go in a very different direction, but at least giving some thought to the kinds of positions and responsibilities that you might want to be considered for at some point in the future. I think Erwin kind of touched on this. What kind of professional responsibilities do you want? So you had mentioned having high personal contact with individual students. That's a lot of responsibility, and that's a responsibility that some folks love and that they cherish that so much that they don't want to move into positions where it's, okay, I may not be the one who's directly working with undergraduate students or with graduate students, but I'm the one who's helping others who are working in those capacities. I'm still going to have contact, but it's not going to be that intense one-on-one or small group contact that occurs on a daily basis. Other things you think you should be thinking about?
I think you kind of hit it on the head, Matt, with the 1 in 5 years. I think a lot of us young professionals emerging in the field are so focused on our first job, thinking that's the first stop. I look at some of the people in MSA and OFA, they're all counselors, like not even in higher ed, and then eventually they found their way in higher ed, and then going from hall director to admissions to this and that and this and that. They find their happiness in those positions, knowing that it's not going to be the 100% perfect fit, but if, say, 40% of it is what they want, they can deal with the 60% and enjoy it still. But I think we're just too focused on that first job better be the right pay, the right benefits, the right amount of responsibilities, and exactly what we want, and it's not going to happen.
And
For most of us, at least.
there is so much anxiety that gets caught up in making sure that the first job check marks each one of those things. Sometimes people get almost, it's like a debilitating anxiety about it because they don't know what they should do, and they can want to say, "Oh, I'm going to keep looking because this isn't the perfect position yet." So when you're thinking about that, what do you want to be doing in 3 to 5 years? You should also be thinking about in terms of what is it that I need to be learning in order to be eligible for positions in 3 to 5 years. What specific skill sets? Which then ties into what skill sets do I have right now that I bring to the table?
How might you think that you could do that? This exercise that Matt just said. What skill sets do I need? It's a pretty practical way that you can do this exercise like tonight. What do you think you could do?
Research jobs that are like something right above what I would think I'd start into, right? So
Look at live job postings right now, and identify for some of those fantasies. What's the gap? What do I need to develop to get from where I am to this thing that I want to be? And it helps you understand what are the internships that I want to ask for? What might I raise my hand and say for a current supervisor or context that you're in? How might you start to develop the skills that you recognize are something that you need as a growth area to let them present themselves to you? Has anyone ever done that?
I think Tamara made us do that in
Yeah.
the intro class.
Cool.
Find your first job,
Yeah.
job description, and then find a job just
Yes.
above it, and have them hanging on your desk, which
what is field experience?
Was it field? Okay, I knew it was one. I knew it came from Tamara. I
Yeah,
just can't
I did.
remember which class.
I was just thinking about it too.
Yeah, so it was very helpful to understand the gap between the two.
And gap between self and
And the
what's
first job.
next.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, that really opened up my eyes to, oh no, I'm really off for my first job, or I think I'm on par. However, 3 years down the road, I'm gonna have to get on my horse and go. So thanks, Tim.
We'll give, in the, whatever hashtag, we'll give thanks to Tamara for.
Yes.
Other things to be thinking about, where do you want to be working? And that encompasses a lot of different issues. So that could be what type of institution you want to be working at. What type of functional area might you be considering? Are you geographically bound to a particular area? And then thinking about, okay, what is included within that area? So if you own a house in Greeley, if you have a partner, if you're already in a professional job and you're not planning on leaving that or leaving that particular institution, then starting to, again, it ties into what you said, is you start eliminating certain things that, at least for right now, may not be areas or thoughts that you consider for your next job. So if you know that you're going to be staying in northern Colorado, then you've bounded your search, which in some ways can be really freeing, because a lot of the other things that may seem really interesting in further locations, those are not going to be things that you're going to be focusing on, at least for the present. That may be a few years from now, but for right now, you're going to be focusing on developing your networks in northern Colorado, either here or at Ames Community College or at Colorado State University or at CU Boulder or some of the Denver schools. But you don't have to worry about positions in Oklahoma or California or Washington State. And that can be really freeing, because that whole other area that you think other people are looking at, you don't really have to spend time thinking about right now.
Can I also add on the flip of that? Working with students who try to conquer the entire globe or entire United States while they're job searching become really overwhelmed. So if you know there are big old states you can cross them off. Like, if geography is of value in one of the ways that you're guiding yourself way forward, conquering the United States is really, really hard in a job search. Like, I witness year after year students get really overwhelmed, where we have to have conversations about geography and what parts of geography matter to them.
And then there's another practical element to this, which is, how much money do I need to be making? And that gets tied in with, how much debt do I have? And what are my living costs? Those will help shape the kinds of positions that you might be considering. And you're not going to be able to answer these questions just by doing the thinking. It's going to have to be by talking to others. That can be talking to your advisor, talking to professors that you have, talking to people in career services. And it can also be done by, Emily mentioned this earlier, informational interviewing. Who here is familiar with informational interviewing? So for the people that might be watching this later on, let me give you an example of how informational interviewing might work. Let's say we don't know each other, but I'm a master's student getting ready to graduate, and I really don't know which area I'm interested in, but somebody said that career service is a really interesting area to go into. I call up Renee, and I say, Renee, I'm a graduating MA student. I've done a field experience in housing, but I think I'm really interested in learning more about career services. would you be willing to spend 30 minutes talking with me about what it is that you do on a day-to-day job, what you would be looking for in people who you would be hiring for career services, and then what you think are the most pressing issues that career services is going to be facing for the next 5 to 10 years?
I always say yes to this.
And almost every professional always says yes to this because we love talking about what it is that we do, and because usually somebody has taken the time to do the same thing for us. So even though it seems really strange to cold call somebody and ask them for an informational interview, most people in higher education know exactly what you're asking for. You're not going in there for a job. You're not going in there to ask for an internship. You're going in there to collect information. But this funny thing happens. When you're in there collecting information, people like making connections. So Renee may not have an opportunity, but she may be able to say, you know, I think what you really should be doing is doing an informational interview over at CSU or at Ames Community College, or this is the language I think you need to start thinking about using when you're applying for positions in these career centers. And if Renee is aware of an opportunity, she may very well say, let me make a phone call, or let me see your materials so that when you submit them, you have a really good chance of getting an interview.
I'll also say, let me call my friend at this institution because I think they would also be willing to talk with you. So it becomes more than just an individual conversation. And hopefully that is someone that you know you can also trust if it is a connection of the person that you initially reached out to.
So we require you to do a field experience in the HESAL program, in part because we want you to be developing these kinds of connections. And then we also want to instill this idea you should feel comfortable conducting informational interviews because you quickly start expanding out your network and your understanding of what goes into each field. And it's only that way that you can take your initial thoughts about, I don't want to do anything in the financial aid office. Well, only after you talk to somebody in financial aid and hear why they're passionate about it, might you be open to saying, I hadn't thought about it in that context. So we encourage folks to be conducting informational interviews throughout their search and even after they've landed their first job, because all you're doing is collecting information. All this reflective work goes into, in my mind, to preparing for a step that will come much later in the job search process, but that is being able to answer the following question. Tell me about yourself.
It's everyone's heads just go,
Oh, right. Because then if I'm the interviewer and I ask you to tell me about yourself and your response to that is, well, tell me what it is that you want to know, or where do you want me to begin? That signals to me that you actually haven't done all the thinking that goes into answering the question, tell me about yourself, and that you haven't really prepared for interviewing for the specific job that I'm offering.
Can I add in?
Please.
I really struggle with folks that only give me a list of their accomplishments. You are separate from what you have done. And if I am going to supervise someone who does not know who they are, I then struggle with how am I going to give you feedback? Are you aware of the impact you have on other people? Are you able to digest things in a way that you can reflect on self? If you can answer who you are, I should be able to probe there a little bit and start to understand what is that going to be like in the world of work. With someone that's going to need to give you feedback, with someone that's going to witness you engage with other humans, and folks that only sort of define themselves by what they have done, I think are not really understanding who they are, and who is your place in relation to all the ways in which you show up in the world.
And you don't, the other, so I think tying into this, you telling me what's on your resume, which I probably have right in front of me and have already reviewed, doesn't add to it. because I'm saying, this is your time, this is your chance to let me get to know you and how you think of yourself. I already have where you went to school, your major, I probably have your GPA, I have the various positions that you've already done. What I really want to know is, what have you taken away from all these things?
How have you grown? Who have you become?
And this is the kind of thing you cannot do. You cannot answer this question thinking on your feet at the interview. You should have practiced this question, answering this question with other people numerous times before you get to that stage where you're actually submitting application materials to a position. And then be prepared to answer it between 1 and 15 times during the actual interview day that you're on campus.
There is a MCB guest speaker that comes in from State Farm that talks about post-interview. This person's like an HR director, and in the end, what is the thing that a hiring manager uses to decide upon which candidate they're going to hire? And this person would argue that it is that afterwards, someone will say, I just liked that candidate. And for someone to walk away with a sense of just liking you, they need to make some form of human connection. And without enabling yourself to be seen in an interview, I think you miss out on an opportunity to really connect human to human with someone else. Where like a resume can make this really wonderful shell, this really like professional looking thing, whatever that means, but then I miss out of this glimpse to see you as a person. And I'm going to engage with you as a person every day. And if I don't get a sense of who that is, like I sit in interviews sometimes with, I want to have a hammer and like crack away the polish and literally ask someone to be like, this isn't how you'd be when we sit down for coffee, right? Because I couldn't do that. And I pass on all those folks. And it's because they can't answer that question, and they present to me this facade of what they think they should answer with.
Right.
I don't know how else to say that, but it is about a human connection in letting someone see you and then letting yourself be seen, which is a part about being vulnerable that in interview land, right, you think you got to show up like robot, or that you have to be perfect suit, and no one gets to see who you are because you're not enabling yourself to be vulnerable with them. So that's just my little...
Right. Oftentimes working with students, they don't know where to begin. I don't know how I should answer this. And one of the ways I get people to start thinking about this, let's say we had 2 or 3 of your best friends that you've grown up with, that you've spent a lot of time with, they've seen you at your best and at your worst, and they were sitting around this table right now, and I said, what words would you use to describe this person? Give me 3 words. Now, of course, we're not going to bring in those people, so this is how you think people will think of you. But as you generate those 3 words, and this will change and evolve as a starting place for thinking about the characteristics that you think people see in you. And that's a way to start cracking through that veneer to say, these are the things that are most important about me. So it might be things like, I'm dependable, I'm curious, I'm passionate. And then using the things that are on your resume to start filling in, well, how can I demonstrate that I'm dependable? How can I demonstrate that I'm passionate? What is it that I'm actually passionate about? When you're able to start using those kinds of terms to describe yourself, to be able to answer the question, tell me about yourself, you're making a really powerful human connection.
I heard some of the AVP candidates are on campus for the equity and inclusion position. And I witnessed them as a candidate, but then I also witnessed them as a job searcher. So I'm like picking up on what they're doing and like getting a sense about how it is relating to the audience. I'm watching the audience connect with them. And I heard a candidate and recently say, at my core, this is who I am. And I had this moment in my thinking mind about this candidate, and I thought, I see you. You just let me see you. And some other candidates I don't think enable us to see that core or don't have the words to describe what that is. So then they make up all this pretend fancy interview language, but we don't get a chance to see them. Does that make sense? I think that was just a kind of a cool way to let the audience know, like, this is really who I am. That sort of essence of you.
Do you think that would be fair to say that, I guess when I'm thinking about this, I'm, obviously envisioning applying and interviewing for positions in higher ed. So this, to me, feels like it's kind of like the why question. So like, my resume is like the what makes me qualified for this position. But someone saying like, tell me about yourself. Obviously, there's much more that goes in my family and things like that. But like, to me, it's like, why do I, not like, why do I want this position, but sort of like, and I think that kind of, to me, goes into like, what was my passion that got me into student affairs? Like, why? Or is that still just like interviewee question answer?
No, when you're thinking about why you went into student affairs, we want to put some language around that.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell me, we're going to do this for the camera right now, so you can make things up.
Okay.
But why did you decide you wanted to go into student affairs?
Because I wanted to help students in the ways that I was supported during my undergraduate experience, so that way that I could be just as successful and to obtain the degree that I received. So I had a lot of influential people that supported me throughout my undergraduate experience that I don't think I would have been successful without them, and so I kind of want to also help students in that same way.
I think that's a good first attempt at an answer. But we want to polish this a lot.
Right.
And I want to ask some probing questions. Like, when you say you want to help students, there are lots of different ways that you can help students. And everybody on campus, in some way or the other, is helping students. So I want to then ask you some probing questions about what specific ways do you want to help students, or what specific ways were you helped that you think that you now bring to the table and you can see yourself helping other students. And this is where it's going to become very individualized, because if you're interviewing for a job in
Which position?
OFA,
Right.
if you're interviewing in housing, how you want to, what your response is going to be very different.
It may also be, so yes, and sometimes people will combine those questions, like why this position, why this area of student affairs with tell me about yourself, but there's still part of that response that seems external to you. Does that make
Sure.
sense?
Because because it's more focusing on like the other people that influenced me as opposed to like, okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
And there's a place in between, right? We are connected to our other
Right.
and others around us. So it's just to grapple with and to ensure that is a yes when you grapple with it and it comes from self.
In our previous shared experience, I think it was pretty common that we would have students say, I want to go on to become an MD, medical doctor. Well, why? Because I like helping others. Okay, partly what that tells us is that there's this whole universe of helping others. We need you to be thinking about how is it that you specifically want to be helping and working with others. The person who is helping file the insurance claim so people can go in to see the doctor are helping them every bit as much as the medical doctor that's actually seeing them. We have to be thinking about all those other things that go into what makes you want to be helping others and in what ways. Do you want
I
to?
love that question and to grapple with it if you ever want to connect. So
Yeah, but these are the things that everybody deals with, and this is why you can't answer this. You can't be thinking of your answer as you're sitting in an interview. We've both seen this happen because we've both been on many search committees, and you know exactly when a candidate has not thought about this because you know these sort of default go-to responses, and you're thinking, wow, I wish I would have had 20 minutes with you a week ago to ask you some questions, because if you had just thought about this, you would be, I look at your resume and I want you to be here. I want to work with you, but what just became apparent to me is you haven't really thought about this job, or you haven't thought about this institution, or what this means. And I'm going to take somebody who maybe doesn't have the same amount of experiences, but who's demonstrated to me they want to be here.
And I would say this happens at every layer of the institution.
Yes.
So search committees that I have been on, from entry level to upper level staff, same feedback. I wish I could have met with you a week ago. Like, to be able to answer this question, I wish I could have given you feedback on your resume and cover letter. And it's the exact same things that are the things that keep people from getting access to the opportunities that they're interested in. And if they just received a little coaching, may be able to overcome some of those things that are pretty common for folks.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that next stage in
Sure.
the search process?
So the way Matt and I sort of talked about this is that we talk about sort of the who are you, where are you going, and then the how will you get there. Will be also part of what we in Career Services can work with you all on. Things like how do I go about my actual job search, even if it is how do I go about my internship search. I sometimes witness from, I get to sit behind the scenes with a lot of students that present themselves to me, but I can't say, oh, your peer is thinking the exact same thing. Like your best friend was just in here before you and said blank. But what I tend to witness from being on that side is that within higher education, folks are really good at socializing others about certain ways to go through job searching. Meaning students come in thinking there is a way to go through an internship search, a job search. Meaning, and this is, I also think this is a little problem in our field, that when you go to people, they'll tell you, these are the graduate programs you should apply to, you shouldn't apply to these are the schools you should apply to, and everyone should go to NASPA or ACPA or Oshkosh to job search. And I think that is, if job searching were an entire piece of pie, that is just one slice. There are a whole lot of other ways to search for opportunities. And being on the other side, I witness the majority of our students gain opportunities by not going to national conferences. And there are often times where I wish I could, like, megaphone style to everyone saying, there's another way. You don't have to feel so bad if you can't make it to the conference, or you can't take that much time off of work, or you can't afford to stay in a hotel in some big city. That there are so many other ways to job search. So I just want to normalize that I witness people land opportunities doing it a different way. So finding, part of what Matt said, understanding self is going to help you understand what values you have that are going to help you make decisions about where you're applying and how you're applying to different positions. So when it comes to job searching, that's another great thing to talk through with many others, like get different people's advice, but please don't think that there's only one way through. I don't know how else to say that.
Well, there's actually an infinite number of different ways through it. So something I want to bring up as a final point, so I'm going to jump to that right now, is you should be talking to individuals in those positions that you might see yourself in 5 to 10 to 15 years and ask them how they got there. And it is rare that somebody says, I knew when I graduated this is what I wanted to be doing, and 15 years later I achieved the terminal position that I have always wanted to be, and I'm going to be here for the rest of my career. Serendipity plays such an important role in the job search process. Everybody has a different way that they went about getting to where they are right now. the takeaway is to think that what you do is you put together a resume, you answer the questions that we've just put together right now and shared with you, and then you go to a national conference and you interview at a table there, and you get it. They fly you out to three different schools, fly you out, and you interview, and you get an offer from 2 of them, and then you get to make a decision between which one you like the best. It just doesn't work that way. Yeah, for a small percentage of people, that's what works, but for the vast majority of them, it's going to be, they won't have done it at a conference. They will be either doing some cold applying, or that they will be using their informational interviewing, or they'll be using their networking skills. And it might take 3 weeks, and it might take 6 months, but that everybody is different. So that I'm going to say this, sometimes if you go to faculty members and are asking them about the job search, their default is kind of either what they know or what they think students should be doing. And oftentimes that default can be the model that Renee just talked about.
If you're looking for someone to be impartial, not tell you the right way, that's what we're doing. If you all have ever seen like our little coasters or our t-shirts that have arrows going in a bunch of different directions, or sometimes they split off or take a curve at an unexpected point in time, like we know everyone's process unfolds in such a unique way, and sometimes it's helpful to have someone who's walking alongside you as that's unfolding and you're trying to figure out, wait, I have a job offer here, but I really want this one, and how does that all work out, and how do you participate in that process? Just want to sort of emphasize that you've got to find your own way through, and it will most likely unfold in a way that is not the way folks have groomed you to think it's going to unfold. Yeah. I don't know. What the other parts that I want to make sure we've got time to answer your questions is your resume. I want you to consider like working on your resume now, working on your cover letter now. One of the things I think folks make a mistake on related to their resume is only talking about the tasks that they accomplish in a job. I think they fail to talk about what did you learn, what did you get better at, how did you become a different person by being in that role. So to talk about how you grew can be really insightful to someone reviewing your resume, and your resume will then look much more like you than other people's resumes that are only talking about the tasks that they've accomplished. And enable yourself to be seen maybe from the moment that you've been in a search committee that is looking at you as a candidate, may get more hunches about who you are by revealing yourself a little bit more in your resume and cover letter. But those two documents tend to be a pretty major hurdle that students, if not having spent the time to work on them early, may identify an internship or job that they're really interested in applying for, and then have a sort of a time gap that they're making up for because they haven't spent the time to work on their resume, cover letter, receive feedback from many other people on what does that look like and how is it tailored for that specific job. So no two job descriptions are alike, therefore no two resume and cover letters of yours should be alike. If you notice that you are hitting send to a lot of job postings and it's not taking you a fair amount of time, you may be not doing it well enough to make sure that you're going to make it through a job search. Behind the scenes of a search committee, they have a rubric that they are rating you on a 1 to 10, 1 to 5 scale on how well you meet that rubric. The rubric has been given to you. It is the job description. It's the minimum and preferred qualifications of the job description. And each of your resumes and cover letters needs to be tailored to that rubric, or else it's going to be like failing an assignment that you're not going to make it through to land an interview for those positions. So it sometimes feels like it's its own job searching for a job, and I think if you're doing it well, that investment of time will pay off.
So I had a student a few months ago who said that they had, in the last week, they had submitted 65 applications. And I thought, the amount of time that you put into printing and everything else that went into actually submitting your materials would have been much better spent identifying 5 opportunities and tailoring your documents for those 5 and sending them off.
Which I guesstimate 75 to 85% of people never ever tailor their resume for the position that they're applying for. They are the automatic no pile. So if you can land in that 25-30% of people that are actually tailoring their resume, you're already beating out tons of your competition by taking the time to align with that rubric and mark high on that rubric. And then we need to talk about your interview skills. So how do you show up in an interview? Because your resume is just a ticket to get to meet with people. After that, it's done its job, and the rest is on you to interview.
What questions do you have? Thank you for asking the question.
Yes, of course. Okay, so I know career services, obviously talk to other folks as well, but like will help with like resume writing, doing mock interviews, things like that.
Yes.
So also I'm thinking about, do you help provide any type, I know a lot of times is when you go to apply for jobs or meet with folks, it's not necessarily just like this interview, let's sit down and have this conversation. Sometimes there's like, you have to provide a presentation or things like that. Do you have any resources to also help with some of that?
Not resources like I could deliver
Right,
you a
but,
packet of things that you could
Help
reproduce.
me prepare a presentation or something like
That's
that.
part of your interview, and
Yeah.
all of the career counselors have gone through preparing a presentation for their interview because that's part of their job is to present to students. So, yeah, we should all be able to help you with that. Yeah, and they've also witnessed behind the scenes, so they hear afterwards like, oh, you know, interviews. I always say like we're going to see how people show up because sometimes it doesn't at all align with your perception of them based upon their resume. You have these certain ideas in your head about who you're going to meet, and then you're just with someone, and that's when you're getting a true sense. And a presentation is just a different context
Right.
to let someone see you. And it may not be comfortable. And if that's the case and it's a growth edge, awesome. Like start inviting friends over to your house and do a presentation on, I don't know, something you really love and see how it goes.
It sounds silly, but unless you practice, the only way to get better at this is to practice it. And pretty soon, if you're inviting people to participate in this, they will ask the same thing of you.
I have a question. So you, Renee, talked about instead of just talking about the tasks and the job duties on your resume, talk about how you grew. So how would I go about writing that or showing that on a resume?
I'm just gonna like the things going through my head are like, how have I become in this job? So things for me of learning about what students at UNC have taught me about my social identities, my ability to have conversations with folks about my privilege, my whatever it may be about who I am, my ability to receive feedback, my ability to change a culture, to institute a healthy culture, to get rid of a wicked, icky culture. Those are never parts of my job description, but have been things that I have learned more about myself than I ever could imagine because of the context of where I was. But if I were to just tell you, you know, I manage, I don't know, $600,000 budget. Okay, cool. But if I tell you instead that I make really difficult decisions about staffing resources in a context of an under-resourced campus, like that's not everybody's job when they get to manage a $600,000 budget. Or the context of career at CSU is wicked different than it is here because they're a student fee funded office and make tons of money, where we are a tuition funded office and operate with what the institution gives us. So even director to director, my, I don't know, the context matters, I think, so much in who you've become, how you've grown, and it takes time to be able to share with other people what is that, because you have to have the whole time through, I think you need to focus on what am I getting better at in here, not like, I can do all these tasks outside out here, and some of those have driven me to learn more things about myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But the tasky like stuff won't tell you who I've become or how I've grown or what type of leader I am, just based upon what's written in my job description.
Sure.
But there are folks that just do their job description, right? I've met some of them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is, how do you take that and put it into a bullet format?
Yeah.
Or how do you craft that narrative in a cover letter so that some of those task things may be in the resume, but your entire cover letter is this narrative about you've entered a particular culture, you did this assessment, you were growing along the entire time, this is how you were able to affect change, and this is what you're hoping to be able to do in your next position.
Your cover letter should not just be a list of tasks that you've done. I've already read your resume. I never read cover letters first. And if your resume doesn't work, I don't read your cover letter. And I witness on search committees, it's about 50-50. Folks that have shown up and have read both documents, or folks that have shown up and started with the cover letter, and folks that have started with the resume.
I have another question, and this might be silly, but is it still standard to try and really focus our resumes so that way it's just one page?
No.
Okay.
Especially not with a master's degree.
Okay.
Yeah. You get a lot more space, and you, if I could, this is kind of funny, but if I could give a TED Talk, it would be about 2 minutes long and you're about to get it. So I think the way people have, I like to joke with students, like I sort of want that platform for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
I would guarantee you have written your resume in the following order: name, contact information. These are important, they still need to stay at the top.
Mm-hmm.
What I guarantee is next is education, work history or experience, leadership experience, volunteer experience, awards and honors. Okay? Right? It's
Is
not
your
like I've
resume
met
like
with
that?
thousands of students. No.
Okay.
So here's what I would recommend instead, and this is so you can rock and roll on that rubric. I just want you to land 10s on the rubric. Name, education, if it is the most related thing that you have related to that job description. My education is at the bottom of my resume because my work experience trumps it. Your next category is relevant, insert word here, experience. Related orientation experience, related financial aid experience, related, why are you laughing? Am I messing up?
No.
Okay.
This is what I tell folks.
So anything that you have done, paid, unpaid, internship, volunteer, anything that is related to what you want to do goes into that category. Your other category is called additional experience, and it's the others. It's the things where if you've been a barista, you don't tell me that you make coffee, but instead you tell me that you've gained really excellent active listening skills and your ability to know people by name, make their order on point. Like, what are the transferable skills you have gained in your experiences that are not related to what you want to do that I know are going to benefit me? So any experience that you have had should be able to be crafted in a way that can show me that it's related to the job. So one of the ones I use, this is just kind of a funny one, but on my resume, I still keep that I was a vintage race car detailer. And part of people may be like, blah, well, may not know what that job is. One, I can have a conversation with anyone for hours about that opportunity. And two, that job taught me how to have conversations with the slowest eater in the world for very long periods of time. So I know because of that job, go on test rides with my supervisor, and then he'd treat me to lunch. Then he'd come back and I'd clean the car. But this lunch period took a really long time. And I know from that job, anytime I'm in a conversation, a meal with an employer, a faculty member that I've never met with before, that I will have patience and have the ability to connect with them for 2 hours if possible, because I learned that skill by being a vintage race car driver. Do you see how that's not connected, but is a transferable skill I gained? But if I just told you I'm really good at using polish on chrome spoke Ferrari wheels, that means nothing to my work now. But if I were to tell you this other piece, you're going to see how that's still connected to everything that I do. Does that make sense? That's why I want you to talk about lifeguarding, barista, bank teller, food service in the dining hall, whatever it is. There's a really great website to help you do that. It's called ONET, and it's furnished by the government. So,
Like
ONET, ONET.
It's cool. I've been to it.
Yeah.
They can literally
Or
give you, like,
you
if you
said-
want to, you're stuck on, like, writing a bullet point, right, for your resume, they'll tell you what to write.
Yep.
And
What is it? A .com? Gov?
I think it's .gov. It's if you just Google ONET, it'll be the first thing that pops up. And under there's a section if you type in any part-time job that you've had.
Okay.
Fish. What was your fish processing?
Fish processing.
Any of those things you can talk about how, like, type it in, and it will give you, like, maybe that would show up like an assembly line or manufacturing, maybe the closest. I don't know if fish processing plant would
that
show
would
up on there.
be difficult.
Food.
Food processor. I guess that's also Cuisinart.
It will tell you the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you probably demonstrated in that job that an employer would want to know.
And some of the most interesting work that you've done, you may say, well, I'm not sure it belongs on my resume. And you put it in there if you decide that you're not sure if it fits there. But these are the stories that get brought up in interviewing, where people are going to ask you about experiences that you've had, where these kinds of things you would never think, unless you've actually done that thinking beforehand about how you're going to craft that response, you would never think to bring it up. But I can talk to Renee for hours about that experience. And one, because I love talking about vintage cars, so as soon as I found out about that, it was, she still shares stories about that. But each one of you has these experiences, but you need to have done the thinking about it first, about how does this connect? How is this going to connect with other people? And why does this make me a much better candidate than others for this particular position?
I would also say it will make you memorable.
Right.
So afterwards, you folks may forget my name, whatever, but if you like, oh, it's Renee, she used to work on it, or whatever, that she used to work on vintage race cars, it will give you something. So post-interview, one of the worst things I ever heard a hiring authority say was after interviewing candidates for days at NASPA and ACPA. So we're behind the scenes interviewing folks for hall directors. My director at the time, who shall not be named, turns to me and goes, that person was forgettable. And I was like, oh, that is like the worst thing you could ever say about someone. But I think it was that candidate showed up and gave us the same polish that everyone else gave, that didn't give us something to make a connection with, to connect with them on, to see them as an individual. And even later, all the search committees that I've been a part of, sometimes when you can't distinguish who's who, you can remember stories. You can remember how you were impacted by those stories. And you get to tell a story in your resume, you get to tell a story in your cover letter, and when you show up to meet with other folks. And that's going to be it comes back to that human connection piece. Do you get an opportunity to connect with other in a way that maybe you wouldn't have before? Do you see it? Like, I'm like hopefully dispelling the ways you've been taught to go through a job search. Because you think you've got to go through like suit it up in a way that is maybe not your most comfortable self.
questions?
I do, but I know that we're like out of time, so I don't know.
We can,
I've got
Talk
time.
after.
Emily can edit.
Okay. You're all good. It's just okay, so I guess because yes, particularly with a resume, this is like 100% different than I thought about before. So, first of all, when I was going to apply for student affairs, I thought that I was only going to put my student affairs experience on my resume. One of the issues with that personally, and I'm sorry if this doesn't relate for you all, I'll make this part brief, but I took 4 years off in between my undergrad and grad, and a lot of that experience was not student affairs related. But I guess my question being, so if some of that is being included on my resume, like how, also because I used to think it should still be one page, but like how far back am I going to like my first job when I was 16 years old, or like
I tend to tell folks stick to about 10 years.
Okay.
So post 10 years, you have most likely gained a new experience that is more complex than the one you had that long ago. So it's not, someone's not seeking your entire working history. This is different when you're a faculty member and applying for positions within academia, that a CV means like of life. So it is all of it. Where within higher ed, there's parts where you have to like identify, sometimes it feels like you're cutting away a part of yourself, but it is not that that thing doesn't exist for you. It's what matters for what that rubric is. And how do I get 10s on the rubric within what should be about 2 pages? The rubric, an employer's ability to know that you match the rubric should take place in the first half of your resume, page 1. And you can, back to the relevant section, you can do tricks like writing a qualification section and tell them every single thing that they're looking for that you are. Because then they sit and instead of playing seek and find, they can check the route like
It's right there.
done, 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 done.
Make it easy for them to say, yes, we want to meet with this person. I'm also a big believer that language has power, and that language gives us insight about how we think about things. So when you said you took off 4 years, to me, the only way that you can actually take off of life is that if you had this awesome pool and people were bringing you lunch every day
Yeah, gobs of money.
and gobs of money. My guess is that's not what you were doing those 4 years. So my reaction is, I want to say, whoa, you need to reflect on those 4 years. What did you actually learn during those 4 years, and how did you learn it? And then how does that inform who you are going to be as a person, as a professional?
Some folks in higher ed, especially in career, folks that have experienced the world of work outside of higher education are wicked attractive. Because they get to share an experience that not everyone who has gone straight from undergrad to grad school. I've been in higher education for more years than I could count right now. That can be to your advantage versus thinking that this is like a deficit that you're presenting. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like it gives you glimpses into the world in the ways that no one else may be able to see, and gives you, my guess is that's going to help you connect with students.
If somebody on their resume, this wouldn't be their only experience, but if they have experience in the food services area, as somebody outside, or as I look at that, I know, number one, they're going to be able to multitask. They know customer service. They know what it means when somebody doesn't show up for a shift. They know detail-oriented. They know pressure, and then they also know all hands on deck. If somebody had just been who didn't have that experience, if I'm looking at 2 applications, the one that's going to draw my attention is the person that I say, okay, I know that this person understands what working in a semester might be like, versus somebody who doesn't have any of those kinds of experiences but has had a lot of responsibilities. those are the things that you weigh. So you don't dismiss barista work, food services work. Now, 10 years from now, when you're applying for director positions or dean positions, okay, maybe at that point you don't need to have it on there. I think coming out of master's programs sometimes makes a difference between, yes, I want to spend more time with that person to get to know them versus not that interested.
That's also, if you're ever working with undergraduate students, tell them never to undervalue the experiences that they need to have to put themselves through school, because no matter what those are, there is a way to talk about the skills that they gain that are transferable to what they want to do next.
I do need to go to a meeting now,
Rock on.
but you can.
I've got
continue
time.
on.
If you all have more questions, then if not, I'm also on campus and we can connect one-on-one. So
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
yeah.